It was April 19th, 1947. Ebbets Field, Brooklyn. The kind of afternoon where the air smells like cigarette smoke, roasted peanuts, and something electric that you can't quite name. 47,000 people packed into a stadium built for 30,000, some standing in the aisles, some pressed against the walls, all of them watching a man who had no business being there. At least according to half the country. Jackie Robinson had been in the major leagues for exactly 11 days. 11 days of death threats in the mail. 11 days of teammates who refused to shake his hand. 11 days of opposing players calling him things that I won't repeat here, but that you already know. 11 days of proving, pitch by pitch, inning by inning, that he belonged in a place that had been built specifically to keep men like him out. And on this particular afternoon, the New York Yankees were doing what they always did. Winning, laughing, and making sure everyone in the stadium knew it. What happened in the seventh inning of that game didn't just silence the Yankees. It changed the language of courage in American sports forever. But before I tell you about that moment, you need to understand exactly what kind of man it takes to do what Jackie Robinson did that day. Brooklyn in 1947 was not the romantic borough people romanticize today. It was a borough of shipyard workers, factory hands, immigrants who had survived one war and were still processing what the second one had taken from them. It was a borough that loved the Dodgers the way poor neighborhoods love local heroes, fiercely, personally, as if every win was a win for all of them. The Dodgers weren't just a baseball team in Brooklyn. They were proof that ordinary people deserved something extraordinary. Branch Rickey, the Dodgers' general manager, had signed Jackie Robinson the previous year after watching him play in the Negro Leagues. Rickey wasn't a saint, he was a businessman who saw talent and saw the future. But he also understood that what he was about to do would be the most consequential decision in the history of American professional sports. He told Jackie before signing him, "I need a man with the courage not to fight back. Not because fighting back was wrong, because the only way to win this particular war was to make it impossible for the enemy to justify their hatred." Jackie had to be so undeniably, impossibly good that silence became the only honest response. Jackie understood. He also knew the cost. He had been an officer in the United States Army. He had been court-martialed for refusing to move to the back of a military bus, and he had been acquitted because he was right. He knew what institutions looked like from the outside when they were trying to break you. He had a master's degree from UCLA. He had been an all-around athlete, football, basketball, track, baseball, the kind of man who arrives at excellence in everything he touches, which is its own kind of threat to people who need mediocrity to feel safe. He was 28 years old in 1947, old for a rookie. But this was not a normal rookie situation. The Yankees in 1947 were everything the Brooklyn Dodgers weren't. They were pinstripes and tradition and championships, stacked like trophies on a mantelpiece. Joe DiMaggio, Yogi Berra. A team that didn't just win. They won with an arrogance that felt institutional, inherited, almost aristocratic. They played baseball like men who had never once doubted they belonged on that field, because no one had ever given them a reason to doubt it. And when Jackie Robinson came to the plate that afternoon, the Yankees, from the dugout, from the field, from the bullpen, made sure he heard everything. It was not subtle. It was coordinated. Players barked at him from the dugout steps with the kind of language that was designed not just to insult, but to destabilize, to make you feel small enough to disappear, to remind you that the rules of the game might be the same on paper, but the game being played was something older and crueler than baseball. The Yankees had done this all game. Every at-bat, every time Jackie reached base, every moment he was visible. There were voices reminding him that this was their world and he was a guest who hadn't been properly invited. Jackie heard every word, and he did not respond. Not with words, not with gestures. He put on his helmet, walked to the batter's box, and played baseball. But baseball has a rhythm. And Jackie Robinson, even in his first season, understood rhythm the way a musician understands silence, as something you use, not something that happens to you. By the seventh inning, the Dodgers were trailing. Not by much, but enough to make every base matter. Jackie reached first on a walk and something shifted in the stadium. You have to understand what it meant for a base runner in that era. The steal of home, running from third base to home plate while the pitcher is in his windup, was considered one of the most dangerous, audacious, physically difficult plays in baseball. It required reading the pitcher's exact timing, committing to a full sprint before you knew if it would work, and arriving at home plate at the same moment as a baseball thrown by a man whose entire job was to make batters fail. The margins were not margins. They were fractions of seconds. Most managers discouraged it. Most players attempted it once or twice in a career. It was the kind of play that separated men who played baseball from men who understood baseball as a form of psychological warfare. Jackie stole second on the next pitch. Without anyone noticing, he had already started reading the pitcher. He stole third on the pitch after that, and the stadium began to feel something it couldn't quite name yet. Then he stood on third base, and he looked at the pitcher, and he started to move. The Yankees pitcher looked in for the sign, standard windup. Jackie took a lead off third, the kind of lead that every third base coach will tell you is too big, that gets you thrown out, that makes you look reckless. But reckless and calculated look identical from the outside when the man doing it actually knows what he's doing. The pitcher began his windup. Jackie ran, not jogged, not drifted. He ran at full speed toward home plate before the ball had left the pitcher's hand, while 47,000 people processed what they were seeing with a half-second delay that felt like falling. The pitcher released the ball. The catcher dropped to his knees to block the low pitch. Jackie Robinson hit the dirt, sliding across home plate with his left foot hooking the corner of the bag a fraction of a second before the catcher's glove arrived. Safe. The umpire's arms went wide. For approximately 2 full seconds, Ebbets Field was completely silent. Not the silence of confusion. The silence of 47,000 people who had just witnessed something that required a moment to become real. Then the stadium erupted in a noise that a journalist sitting in the press box that evening described in his notebook as the loudest thing I have ever heard inside a building in my life. He crossed it out and wrote it again because he thought it was too dramatic. Then he left it because it was accurate. In the Yankees' dugout, no one said anything for a long moment. The voices that had been so loud all game went quiet with the kind of quiet that isn't peace. It's the silence of people who have just run out of something to say. What nobody discusses enough about that moment is what it cost Jackie Robinson to produce it. The 1947 season was not a triumph disguised as a struggle. It was a struggle that contained moments of triumph. There is a difference, and it matters. He received so many death threats that the Dodgers assigned him security detail for certain road games. Some hotels refused to house him when the team traveled, so he slept in separate accommodations, alone, while his teammates were together. Opposing pitchers threw at his head with a frequency that statistics from that era make uncomfortable to read today. He was spiked on the base paths on purpose. He was called names by players, by fans, by stadium announcers who found creative ways to make their contempt official. Branch Rickey had asked him not to fight back. What nobody fully accounts for is the metabolic cost of that restraint, what it does to a man's nervous system to absorb that volume of hatred and convert it, every single day, into performance. Jackie Robinson lost weight during the season. His wife Rachel described watching him come home at night and seeing something behind his eyes that she recognized as exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. He won Rookie of the Year that season. He batted .297. He stole 29 bases. He played in every game he was physically able to play in, even on days when he had received threats specific enough that law enforcement was involved. He also carried something that most athletes never carry: the awareness that every at-bat, every error, every day he performed below the standard he had set for himself would be used as evidence by people who needed him to fail. Not evidence against Jackie Robinson, the baseball player. Evidence against the idea that men who looked like him deserved to be in that stadium at all. The personal and the political were the same thing, whether he wanted them to be or not. I had to do well, he said years later. Not for me, for every kid who was watching and being told this couldn't be done. The Yankees lost that game, The steal of home was the turning point that shifted the momentum and eventually the score. But the significance of that afternoon wasn't really about the game result, or even the play itself. It was about what the play demonstrated that couldn't be argued with. There is a category of argument that racists make. That was made explicitly in 1947 and is made implicitly still today, which is that certain people can't handle pressure, that certain people perform in safe environments but collapse when the stakes are real, that when the moment demands everything, there are those who have it and those who don't, and the line between those two groups happens, conveniently, to fall exactly where the person making the argument would draw it anyway. Jackie Robinson, on the 19th of April 1947, with the Yankees' entire roster directing the full force of their contempt at him from 10 feet away, in front of 47,000 people, in his 11th day in the major leagues, ran home, not when it was safe, not when the outcome was guaranteed, when the outcome was 50-50 at best, when the pitcher was mid-windup, when the catcher was already moving, when the entire calculus said, wait for something safer, something more certain, something less likely to make you look like a fool. He ran. That is not the act of a man who can't handle pressure. That is the act of a man who has spent his entire life converting pressure into fuel, because he never had the option of performing only when conditions were comfortable. In the years that followed, Jackie Robinson became one of the most decorated players of his era. He was named to 6 All-Star teams. He won the National League Most Valuable Player Award in 1949. The Dodgers won the World Series in 1955, and Jackie Robinson was at the center of it. Older now, his body carrying the accumulated damage of a career played under conditions no player before him had navigated. He retired in 1956. He was 37, old for baseball, older than his age in ways that didn't show up in any statistics. After retirement, he became something else, a voice, a presence, a man who had earned the right to say uncomfortable things to powerful people, and did so without apology. He was involved in the civil rights movement, in banking, in advocacy for the kind of systemic change that his presence in baseball had made people believe was possible. He was not always easy. He was not always gracious. He was, increasingly, a man who had fulfilled his end of the arrangement with history and was not interested in performing gratitude for having been allowed to do so. He died on October 24, 1972. He was 53 years old. The autopsy found severe heart disease, advanced diabetes, and near-total blindness, conditions that his doctors connected to the chronic stress of a decade of playing baseball under extraordinary psychological duress. His body had been keeping the score that no official record ever would. At his funeral, a letter was read that he had written to his son not long before his death. In it, he described the steal of home as the moment he understood what freedom felt like. Not the freedom of safety, but the freedom of deciding that the worst outcome was acceptable. That being thrown out at home was still better than standing on third base, waiting for someone else to decide what happened next. I ran, he wrote, because standing still was a kind of dying I wasn't willing to do. There is something that gets lost in the way we memorialize athletes like Jackie Robinson. We make the story about the result, the stolen base, the championship, the award, because results are clean and monuments are easier than complexity. We put his number 42 on a plaque, and we retire it across every team in Major League Baseball, which is the right thing to do. And we move on, because moving on is what institutions do. But the actual story, the one that matters if you're listening to this not as a history lesson but as something that applies to your own life, is not about the stolen base. It's about what he did with the voices. Every single person who has ever tried to do something that wasn't supposed to be done by someone like them knows exactly what those voices sound like. They come from the dugout, and they come from inside your own head, and sometimes they sound so much alike that you lose track of which is which. They tell you that you're in the wrong place, that your presence is a mistake someone made, that you can perform well enough in practice, but when the real moment arrives, you'll discover what you actually are. Jackie Robinson ran home on April 19, 1947. While those voices were at full volume, in front of 47,000 witnesses, with nothing guaranteed except that if he didn't try, nothing would happen. He didn't silence the voices because he ran. He ran because he had already decided the voices didn't get a vote. That is the part that no plaque captures. That is the part worth remembering. If someone has been telling you that you're in the wrong place, that you arrived without an invitation, that the game was already decided before you got here, this story is for you. The only answer that has ever mattered to that argument is not a speech. It's not a confrontation. It's not waiting for the right moment or the safer pitch or the more comfortable conditions. It's running. If this story reached something in you, subscribe to this channel right now, because every single week we bring you stories exactly like this one. Real people, real moments, real decisions made under impossible pressure that changed the direction of history. Hit the like button and turn on the notifications so you never miss one. And tell me in the comments, has anyone ever told you that you didn't belong somewhere? And what did you do about it? I read every single comment. And if you made it to the end of this video, you are exactly the kind of person this channel was built for. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop just the number 42 in the comments. No explanation needed. Everyone watching will understand.